On First to the Best, we get to review the often overlooked or forgotten first film by some of cinema's best directors. We'll discuss how these legendary directors got their first opportunities to make their mark in cinema. These are the movies they cut their teeth and learned the filmmaking ropes of Hollywood. We'll take a look at how these filmmakers' careers evolved from here, as well as their signature style, cinematic trademarks, and thematic ideas that may have been prevalent right from their very first chance in the director's chair. So join Cinema Gulp in an appreciation for filmmakers that once you get a taste, we know you'll say,
Once it hits your lips, it's so good!
Hey everyone, welcome to First to the Best here on Cinema Gulp. I'm Ben, and I'm going to be talking about Tony Scott's first film, The Hunger.
And I'm John, and I'm going to talk about Ridley Scott's first film, The Duelists, plural. So The Duelists, this is Ridley Scott's first feature, 1977. Ridley Scott took a long time to get his first feature going. He toiled away for many, many years doing advertising and was 40 before he was able to make his first feature film. The Duelist is a short story by Joseph Conrad, I believe, about two French soldiers during the Napoleonic Wars, and they fight and duel many times over the course of their life over nothing, in my opinion. Over honor, as you say, Ben. So yeah, The Duelist was, like many films by Ridley Scott, a beautiful film to look at, but as a story, I did not find it engaging one bit. I found this movie to be kind of a slog to get through from a narrative standpoint. There wasn't a whole lot I really liked about this movie. It really is just episodic of going back and forth of showing these two guys fighting each other at different points in their history, different points throughout the war. They get promoted and have to kind of move on to different levels of dueling. They move up to a cavalry charge. That's one scene that was kind of edited very strangely, in my opinion. There's some really strange, choppy editing in this movie. But yeah, I got more I can talk about, but Ben, what were your thoughts on The Duelists?
It looked beautiful, like you said. It's got beautiful cinematography, especially the exterior shots. Some of them were just amazing. The set design was cool. At first, I kind of was laughing at the costumes because they're like beefeater looking costumes. And it looked like Harvey Keitel just doesn't look right in that costume. It's just laughable.
Behind me, you got your main cast here, Harvey Keitel, and what is it, Keith Carradine?
Keith Carradine. It's one of the Carradines.
The Carradine's confused.
It's not Kill Bill, and it's not Revenge of the Nerds. Yeah.
It might be like his son or something. I don't know who's related to who. They both do not fit this role. They're supposed to be playing Frenchmen. They bring their American accents for the most part.
They don't even try.
They don't even try, and it takes you
it's
out
like
of the movie.
Kevin Costner'd it completely.
Can you fight? I see no reason whatever for us to fight. What reason would you like? Shall I spit in your face?
These guys, I mean, Harvey Keitel was like straight out of Mean Streets almost, and Keith Carradine should have had a cowboy hat on. I don't know. They just were not French soldiers.
No, Keith Carradine seemed like he was a businessman on Wall Street in this movie.
And like many directors' first films, you know, the studio sometimes gets involved a little bit too much and dictates too many things and doesn't let an auteur or someone like Ridley Scott, who's shown to be a visionary, truly put his own vision forth. He had different actors in mind for this. Actors who were European or English and would have sold the French aspect a lot better, I'm sure. The studio wanted these guys.
Were either one of these guys anybody at that time yet? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, Harvey Keitel, I know, had things like Mean Streets already, I believe.
Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, crazy how he looked old even back then. Like,
I know.
When they're closing up on his face, he's got really wrinkly eyes.
Yeah. He's a weathered dude. I do like his hairstyle in the movie. It's pretty cool. He had the better look. In fact, I probably liked him better than Keith Carradine in the film.
Yeah, and he wasn't in enough of it.
But he's not in as much. Yeah. But I do not get his motivation. I don't get why they duel. I mean, it's there. Like you see what happens and why the first duel takes place, but it's not a strong enough reason, in my opinion, and the fact that they continue it for
like 15 years.
15 years or whatever it is, that didn't make for a strong narrative for me.
Yeah, it's just this ongoing thing, but they always start out, and I appreciated that there were so many duels in it, Like it wasn't just like 1, 2, or 3. Like there was an arm wrestling contest, and then then they're duking it out and getting super tired in one, and the final one was pretty lackluster. I thought, like, we have 2 shots or whatever, but you just don't see Harvey Keitel in any of the scenes until it's like another duel, pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. So you don't get to know much about him, or what he's thinking about in the interim.
Who seems like the more interesting character?
The film's shortcomings are its script to some degree. And I feel that about a lot of Ridley Scott's movies, that his strongest movies obviously have the better scripts. You could say that about any filmmaker. If they've got a great script to work from, they can potentially make a great film. But, even Ridley Scott's movies that are still great to look at, are interesting, but aren't the best, a lot of times it's because the script falters. And he's not a screenwriter. Some of the filmmakers we like to talk about on the show do both. And you can really see that their vision was started on the page as well.
From a directorial standpoint, it's a pretty good first movie as far as like execution and how it looks and how it feels. But like you said, they casted it wrong and the script wasn't there.
As we like to talk about on First to the Best, we like to talk about what we see in this first film that maybe translates into some of their later films. And I do think, I've always thought there's moments in Alien, Ridley Scott's second feature, that when it comes to the way he cuts away from the violence, in a horror movie, it makes sense. It's very quick. You see this flash of violence and you kind of cut away from it very fast. Sometimes that works, and it worked in Alien perfectly. But in this, during some of the duels, they cut away so quick from a moment of violence or whatever the finale of the duel, and they just cut to the next scene without a resolution. It felt very disjointed and weird.
Yeah, they did that several times too, because when the audio drops so fast and hard, it really throws you off.
Yeah, the sound design was just hard to understand people sometimes. There was a lot of poorly executed moments during the duel in terms of the sound design that could have made it make more sense of what you're seeing on screen. The sound and image, they work together so well. You really need that to help when sometimes you have kind of choppy editing. The sound can smooth it out, but it doesn't. It makes it even more choppy in this movie.
So it was a short by Joseph Conrad?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I love Joseph Conrad works, and they made Heart of Darkness into Apocalypse Now. One of my favorite books, Youth. I love Joseph Conrad.
I was hoping for a little better than that film, but first features aren't always that's what they are. They're there for the guys to learn, to get their first opportunity, to prove they know how to work the camera. And that was proven. I mean, the movie is beautiful. I think that final shot of Harvey Keitel standing on the ledge there or whatever, like looking over the valley, is pretty breathtaking.
Amazing.
I mean, that's one thing that Ridley's always been able to do through his whole career, is give us beautiful landscapes. Like anytime even if it's an alien world, he gives you this landscape shot that is breathtaking and awe-inspiring. And that is still in this movie. His career, I feel, takes a shift at G.I. Jane. So we've got, after The Duelist, everyone knows Alien, a movie of basic perfection. We don't need to talk too much about Alien. It obviously is the reason why we all love Ridley Scott so much, for the most part. But his movies in the 80s are some strange choices. We have a whole review on Blade Runner and how kind of slow that movie is. It's still visually, like everything he makes, visually amazing, but most of his 80s movies kind of have that problem. Legend, Someone to Watch Over Me, like they're not his strongest features. Once you get into the 90s, Thelma and Louise, which is one of his best movies ever, maybe second or third best movie. I feel like with G.I. Jane, his editing style became quicker and choppier. I feel like, I don't know specifically if he started using digital cameras on that film or on Gladiator, if he's using digital cameras or not.
Definitely not on G.I. Jane.
At least by the time you get to stuff like Matchstick Men, it feels very digital the way it looks. I feel like his style kind of became more quick cuts, like quicker cut, not as fluid. But I still love so many movies from that era. I mean, Gladiator's great. I love Black Hawk Down. American Gangster is one of my favorites of his. I mean, he's got so many really, really strong films, in my opinion. It's kind of makes one great one and two all right films, and then one great one and then two all right films.
I love Black Hawk Down. That's sort of like the American version of Dunkirk, where it's like all these things happening at once, not a real not a main character per se, you know, like
No,
I mean they're very different movies.
Another thing that I love about Ridley Scott, he's one of my favorite history teachers. I feel like his historical dramas come to life in ways that a lot of other filmmakers don't. I guess you seem to not like some of what he did with Gladiator. I think that really stands out as a reason why I love him as a history filmmaker, a filmmaker who puts that kind of time, puts a time on screen that not many other filmmakers have been able to bring to life. Part of his career started as a production designer. He did like 15 to 20 years working in advertising and production designing for the BBC before he did his first feature. So that's why I think a lot of his films have such strong art direction, like a la an Alien or a Blade Runner, like so distinct, because he had a big hand in making sure those visuals came to life the way he wanted them to.
And that's always one of the strongest things of his work, for sure.
He's not a one-note director. He hasn't really made comedies per se, but he's made movies that have a lot of humor to them.
Yeah, Matchstick Men is probably the closest.
To
I love that
movie.
movie.
You can't forget The Martian, a Golden Globe Best Picture comedy winner. The one collaborator that always stands out to me that I don't have to look up is Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer has scored a lot of his movies, I think 6 of his movies, and it usually stands out. It's usually one of the strongest points. I mean, even when you've got a Ridley Scott movie that brings a lot of strong points, like, great visuals and strong storytelling, great actors, the score, especially if it's by Hans, always stands out and really helps make the movie.
The Gladiator score definitely stands out. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Moving on to Tony Scott, the late, great Tony Scott. John, I think I've told you this several times, he was the first director when I was a kid that made me want to make films, or at least be a part of films in some way, to where I watched Top Gun. A lot of people watched it and said, oh, I want to be a fighter pilot. I was like, I want to be the person that makes that movie, so that's how far back I'd go with Tony Scott. Born in East London, 1944, unfortunately took his own life back in August of 2012. As with so many of his first films, John, this was the only time that Scott worked with South African-born documentary filmmaker Stephen Goblat. Though the DP went on and did a whole bunch of other stuff and had a really great career, the two never worked again together after The Hunger. It was both their feature-length debut, though, but his aesthetic, it comes through so crystal clear. And, using different editors and using different cinematographers, he's collaborated a couple of times. He had this really interesting sort of trifecta of films from 1990 to 1991. He had 3 films released in 90 and 91. Revenge, Last Boy Scout, and Days of Thunder. He was working like a son of a bitch at that point. When he did Top Gun, he used that he collaborated with that DP a few times in Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Days of Thunder. But then after that, he would use different ones, and it's really interesting because you would think that he collaborated with the same people all the time because his films have this real distinct look to them, and knowing and doing some more research on his filmmaking process, it just throws that all to him and gives him that much credit because he obviously picks people that share his, sense of color and sense of lighting and stuff like that, and angles, but he's got to be the one to kind of create that. And because he's so consistent with that, I found it amazing. I mean, after using an array of DPs, but always keeping that orange, red color palette, so
very distinct to Tony, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that brings me to The Hunger, because not so much in this one, and I love talking about this movie because I think The Hunger is a great first movie. I think it's, it's a better than average first movie for sure. But I love watching it, even if it's not the most entertaining movie in the world to some people. I love watching little things about someone whose career I've watched my entire life and picking out parts because, oh my God, I mean, just the silhouettes, the close-up silhouettes, the slightly sharpened where the blue light is flooding through the blinds and it just floods the frame. Did the same thing in Top Gun. Top Gun has some of that orange and red. But during the sex scene specifically, he uses that blue, and it's gorgeous. You know, it has this really interesting look to it. This movie didn't do that well. Made less than $6 million. Didn't do great at Cannes when it was first released. I think right now it holds like a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't give a fuck about Rotten Tomatoes. But
That's a shame.
it was dedicated in the memory of Tony Scott's brother, Frank. And I guess Blade Runner was also dedicated to Frank?
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, that's cool. So this movie is sleek, it's sexy, it's gothic, it's set in New York, but most of it is shot in London, which is interesting. Catherine Deneuve, who John probably remembers from his favorite Halloween mixer movie, Repulsion.
Oh, yeah.
Susan Sarandon, just a young, gorgeous Susan Sarandon. And David Bowie, and of course, one of the unsung heroes of the 80s, Cliff DeYoung, who's just such a great character actor of the 80s.
The boyfriend, Susan Sarandon's boyfriend.
Yeah. I just love the imagery in this movie. I love the imagery of bats and the word, even though the word vampire is never used at all. I love the music, especially the opening scene. I call it kind of like a New York punk rock scene, vampires. Whole opening scene's like a big music montage, and that's perfect because that's kind of what Tony Scott was coming from, commercials and music video and things like that.
White on white, translucent black capes, back on the ground.
And it throws out, this movie has two very distinct loud scenes. Kind of the opening scene, it throws out this big musical number, which is fast and fun. And then the final scene is very loud, and there's a lot of stuff going on with the sound design, which, you know, you could call kind of student filmish, kind of Lynchian sort of. But I love how it's pieced together. It's fun. It's someone creating something interesting with the sound design. But
I was really impressed. I was really, really impressed with David Bowie. I thought he did an excellent job in this role. Eventually he is covered up by a lot of makeup, and he really, really sells the performance of the old man. I was very, very impressed with him when he gets to those stages where he is old and decrepit and can barely move, and you don't even think that there's a young man underneath all that and doing that performance. So it's kind of a tale of two movies. The first half is kind of David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve's story, and the second half focuses more on Deneuve and Susan Sarandon.
Yeah.
And I find the first half more interesting. I feel like this is a wonderful companion piece to Interview with a Vampire and Let Me In, because those are the films that deal with the terrible side of, you know, living forever and just everyone thinks being a vampire is fun and cool, but these movies really tell you why you would not want to become a vampire.
that's exactly what this movie does. It shows it in a sad light, a lonely light. Even though this is not an action movie, to me, it feels like Tony Scott so much. Like, and when you're watching it, there's moments that don't, but then just, he's such an interesting filmmaker to me. Like, every single angle, and no matter if it's an exterior or interior shot, specifically interior, you always know it's him for some reason. Like, even someone walking down the sidewalk, it just feels like him. Sometimes it's when he uses music and when he doesn't use music. And it's interesting that he was learning all that stuff in this film, and how much of it he's, like we were talking about Catherine Bigelow's Loveless, where not much of that carried over really into like her bigger films. There's so much in The Hunger that, again, it's not an action movie, but it has all those Scott things. You know, like I said, light flooding the frame, the music, earlier Scott transitions. It really shows so much about like him just being such a master class, dare I say, of like visual storytelling to me.
So this is the fourth film we're talking about in this series, and it's the first one where we really feel like the director's trademarks do translate beyond that first film.
That's true.
Guys, but the use of music later in the movie, the classical music, where Deneuve is playing this song on the piano, this classical
The Flower
song.
Duet. It's
Yeah,
called
which
The
is like
Flower
it's a
Duet.
song we've all heard, but when
Yeah.
she explains what it's about, that it's like these two women serenading each other about thinking about going down a stream that's dreamlike or something, and in that moment where it's about the two women kind of making that connection and potentially seducing each other, it just worked for me. It was really, I think there was some great use of music all throughout, and I thought that was a really, really cool scene.
See, the reason I'm smiling is because my next thing was going to say, though it's not a perfect film, and here's why, and it's that scene that you're talking about.
Oh, you don't like that?
No. Okay, I think the whole movie's great, but here's my thing on that scene. So let's look at the blatantly obvious wet white t-shirt moment with Susan Sarandon. That's so obvious.
Can we pause it?
And they must have put her in a freezer and then took her out immediately, if you know what I'm saying. And it's playing to the flower duets when they cut to that part. And I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong, but it was clearly supposed to be something very serious, sexy, and intimate. And to me, it just comes off like something you'd see on Howard Stern's Butt Bongo Fiesta or something. Like, it's almost like it's like a Red Shoe Diary thing, but played for laughs and like a spoof comedy. Because like, oh, look, I got water all over where my freezing nipple is.
Well, I think for me, because this movie was billed as the lesbian vampire movie,
right? That's what
it was
it's known
something
as,
that
yeah.
I'm kind of like waiting of like, okay, well, obviously we're leading up to what is going to be the lesbian stuff. And you're right, it plays out kind of like silly with that exact moment of the spilling on the shirt.
Just that moment when they cut to the bedroom, it's beautifully shot. I mean, and it's got so much more class than something like Orange is the Blue color, lesbian color of blue, whatever the fuck that movie's called, which is just like
blue is the warmest color.
Blue is the warmest color, which is exploiting these poor actresses.
I thought you were talking about Orange is the New Black.
I get them confused.
Like prison rape?
Lesbians in France, lesbians in prison. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, there's not everyone's talking about the hunger on a daily basis, but if there was any controversy, it's that the studio mandated a reshoot for the ending, and you noted, I don't even know if you knew that they did that, but you asked me like, hey, what's up with this ending? Because it doesn't make any sense, really. But it doesn't need to, I guess. Like, I don't know. I would have liked it if it wasn't there, but you needed to have something. You needed to have a perspective still there, I guess.
Yeah.
I just quickly, we'll go back and forth on Scott as a filmmaker, because he's literally been making movies pretty much since we have been born. And his movies hit me so hard in different points of my life. And different points, they inspired me for different reasons. Like Top Gun is that one that said, holy shit, like I want to make this thing. And then, there was other great movies for a while, but then it was True Romance, where I'm like, oh my God, like this is the best movie I've ever seen, And then he did it a couple of other times later on, but more just from like, oh, it's so good to see him back in like Crimson Tide was another there's a Hans Zimmer score that's badass. That's one of those movies where it's like, God, that shouldn't have worked. It was billed as an action movie, but it's not. It's just an intense movie. Like, so he's like you were talking about with Ridley. For me, like Tony, as his career shifted and moved, he had just such powerhouse films that came out that spoke to me in such different ways. And I loved it that one was when I was 9 and one was when I was 16 and then one was when I was like 18 or 17. Like all these different points in my life to inspire me, to keep me wanting to do movies, where some people, I want to be a filmmaker when I'm a little kid. Then I want to be a fireman. And then I want to be a train conductor. He's one of those guys that always prompted me up to go, oh yeah, I still do want to do that,
I think I was telling you during the summer for Tony, for me, when I think about his movies, especially like his 80s and early 90s movies, which I feel are a lot of his strongest films, I feel like he makes me think of the summer. He's like, his films make me think of a good time during the summer. Not that they all take place then. Some of it comes down to his orange lighting aesthetic that he likes, his warm tones that he brings to so many movies. But I just feel like, a lot of his action movies from the 80s and early 90s are just that like good time summer action flick. But they're elevated. Almost all of his action movies aren't just your standard action fare. Like he really does bring something special to one, the way he shoots his action. He brings great characters to the screen. I love Tony's work. I feel like one of the differences that I see between Ridley and Tony, when I think of Tony's movies, I think he captures a mood really well, whatever the mood he's going for, a la The Hunger, is so stylistic and moody. Whereas like Ridley kind of captures a time better. And he goes for it more. Like Tony, I don't think if I think about it, did Tony ever even do like a true period piece? I don't think he did. He stays very contemporary. So Ridley stands out as being able to kind of capture that time really well, but I think Tony stands out as capturing a mood really well in every movie.
Yeah.
And that's why in some of his later films where, as I was saying, I think Man on Fire is where he found that new style that he liked with kind of quicker cutting and, just different look of the lenses he's using and just kind of the different style to his cinematography that he wasn't using earlier in his career. Even I think some of the warm tones disappear. Am I right about that? Did he?
Yeah, it got much grittier.
Yeah,
warm tones disappeared for a sharper, grittier feel.
Both these filmmakers are dependent on how good a screenplay can be, and those later films in Tony's career suffered from their screenplays.
I think Domino is his worst movie. I find it almost unwatchable. So for someone who I consider one of my top 3-4 directors of all time, I do not like that movie. It's just a slog.
I wasn't willing to rewatch it for this.
It's a big mess. Yeah, and then Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. It's like, I just don't know why that was remade. It was competent, but it wasn't. I love that he ended his career ended on not a great but a solid note with Unstoppable, because say what you want about the movie, it's just got really 2 good performances. It's not violent, but it's action packed and it's intense, and it's got so many practical stunts and effects work in it. I just had a blast watching Unstoppable, and I'm glad that was his final over Pelham 1, 2, 3. He does not write his stuff. And there's been a lot of writers. Shane Black was one. Shane Black's The Last Boy Scout was on the Hollywood Blacklist as one of the best scripts. It's one of the most expensive scripts ever bought. And it wasn't Tony Scott that destroyed it. It was the studio that destroyed it. Shane Black has even, said that. And then you have Tarantino. Tarantino should not like somebody directing his movies, but he loved Tony Scott and what he did. God, what freaking Quentin Tarantino and Tony Scott making a movie together. How, of course, you get true romance out of that,
Much like Quentin Tarantino has his foot fetish that seems to make it on screen all the time. I do think Tony had a little bit of a thing for women with short hair. If you look over his career, he has characters with short hair.
So often, more often than not, he showcases such a fuckload of violence, and that his films always seem to have so much heart at the center, with the exception of, like I said, something like Domino. The Hunger doesn't exactly show that. It does, but in a different way, and because that movie's so stylistic and he's learning the craft more, I still think he gets away with a lot of that, and it really does. It shows more emotion. I'll put it that way. But we see his filmmaking in every single thing he's done, all the way up until when he died. Don't do it. Yeah, and then on August 19th of 2012, midnight or 12:30 p.m. He jumped off the Vincent Thomas Bridge in San Pedro. And there's a lot of speculation that he had cancer. I don't want to speculate because I want to honor him, not talk about it as something that I want to speak out of turn. And because that stuff doesn't matter. Obviously something was wrong. I like to think he was not happy with the state of films. So some people have speculated on that, but it was really hard to hear that news. He was cremated and his ashes were spread Hollywood Forever Cemetery on 24th of August in LA. And I thought it was really great. Tom Cruise, Christian Slater, Val Kilmer, Eddie Murphy, Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman, Keira Knightley, tons of people came out and gave him a wonderful tribute. He's definitely a filmmaker I miss. 8 years, almost 9 years that we haven't had a Tony Scott movie, but we have so many gems that I'm never sick of Tony Scott movies.
Tony will be missed, has been missed for a long time now. I think you pointed out, you thought, if we didn't lose Tony, he probably would have been at some point maybe working on something like a comic book movie. You thought he'd be a wonderful fit for a movie like this, the Flash movie, which I could agree with you. I would have loved to see a Tony Scott, anything Tony Scott comic book would have been an interesting approach.
So real quick, this might be an easy answer, but favorite Ridley film?
Alien would be my favorite, but Gladiator, I wouldn't say Gladiator is like on its heels, but I love Gladiator.
I'd go Alien, and then probably Matchstick Men. I just love that movie.
Oh, wow.
Favorite Tony Scott movie?
My favorite Tony Scott would be The Hunger. No, True Romance, I think.
For sure. 100%.
True Romance, and then probably Crimson Tide, maybe?
Same here. Exact order. And then Man on Fire, probably. And again, those are the ones where I'm like, those are the ones that lifted my spirits at different parts of my life, you know?
Yeah.
Those are some masterpieces, in my opinion, especially True Romance.
I got to agree with you on those.
Well, there you have it, folks. Anything else you want to throw in there, John?
Nope, nothing else.
This was a fun one. This got a little hard at the end, a little choky. It's, I mean, I know it's been a while and stuff like that, but when you reflect on it,
look at this guy. He's so many of these pictures. I look at him on the internet. He has this wonderful smile. He just seemed to have like this bright spirit in him. It's sad to know how things ended up for him, but in so many of the pictures, if you look him up online, he's got this beaming smile.
This is a good one. Scott Free Brothers. So cool. Glad we got to do this one.
Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and look us up under Cinema Gulp.
And please click like, subscribe, tell your friends, everybody become Cinema Gulp subscribers. I'm telling you, it'll change your life forever. So for Cinema Gulp, I'm Ben.
And I'm John. We drink your cinema.